Namaskar everyone, welcome to Desi Talk. I am your host, Sushti Prabha, the managing editor at India Currents, and we're waiting for Yashu to join, who is my co-host. Let's see if I can get her on. Today's topic is going to be about mental health in Bay Area and access to resources, which is something I'm very passionate about, and we're very lucky to have a mental health professional that will speak to us about this specifically. So I'm really happy about that, and to give people, oh, awesome. Yeah, Yashu has kind of put it in the chat. Yep, cool. Yashu, are you able to join? Because I know sometimes it doesn't work. Anyway, so yeah, we have a mental health professional that works in the Bay Area, lives in the Bay Area, has been working on this topic for, I believe, over 10 years. So she has a lot to offer. Let's try again. Issue. Let's see. Yay!
Hi,
What's up?
how are you?
I'm all right. How are you?
I'm doing great. I'm excited for today's episode. Again, as you guys know, I am Yashu Rao, plus model and confidence coach, and founder and CEO of hashtag Happy Yashu, confidence and lifestyle coaching company, and of course, my amazing co-host up here.
Hi, I'm Srishti Prabha, the managing editor at India Currents. So today we are kind of continuing the dialogue which we began at the beginning of this month on mental health. This is Mental Health Awareness Month, and it is also AAPI Heritage Month. So we're kind of doing the combination thing where we're incorporating our Desi elements, and then also kind of introducing that mental health space and what that means in the Desi community. And we're very, very lucky to have found somebody that is, exactly in line with both of those things. But before we start with that, how are you? How's your week been?
Very hectic, busy. I know for the past couple of weeks I've been in production mode, and I'll be a little bit busy until June 8th, and then and dissertation submission. So it's been super, super busy, but we hanging in there. We keeping it together. How are you? How's your week been?
It's busy. There's so much going on all the time. I feel that, just have to keep track of everything. But that said, we're making it through. We're doing it all. I think this is a good theme for the month because it's so important. And some of the things that Sangita will be telling us about are resources that I actually want to access, because I feel like I haven't had I haven't been in the best mental health state myself. So learning from her and like what we have to offer like globally and then also very locally will be really, really interesting. And so with that, let me introduce our interviewee. Her name is Sangita Biswas. She's a licensed family and marriage therapist in the Bay Area. She counsels and provides therapy to individuals, couples, and families with diverse cultural backgrounds. An immigrant from India, her acculturation journey resonates with the South Asian diaspora she works with, advocates for how therapy works and benefits the people around her. So seeking therapy in a collectivist culture is not common, but as we now live lives away from most of the support groups we require, she seeks to find new ways of support. So if you ever want to find her, her Instagram handle is Lotus Family Therapy, and I believe is also the name of her business. And she very kindly gave me her contact information. So if you're interested in contacting Sangita, her phone number is 408-823-9360. So we'll repeat a lot of this information at the end of the interview, but I'm very happy to have her on, and let me bring her in to the conversation.
I'm excited. Again, guys, this is India Currents Desi Talk. Be sure to tap in, check out india.currents for all the latest updates and information. Hi, Sangita.
Hi,
Hey, hey,
Sangita.
Yashu. Hey, Srishti. You can hear me?
Yep,
Yes.
absolutely.
Great.
I'm
After
so
all these,
glad that our live we tested the live a little bit
we did.
earlier, so everything is working.
Yes.
Um,
Uh,
so
We,
Sangeeta,
yeah.
why don't you start with telling us who you are a little bit? I know I kind of said very briefly who you are,
Mhm.
where you're from, and what you do, but I'd love to hear a little bit more about it and, inform our viewers.
Sure. And first of all, thank you so much, Srishti, Yashu, for having me. And thank you for starting the conversation with such vulnerability. Talking about your own, the sense of fatigue, the sense of, we're getting through it, we'll get through it, but the acknowledgement that it is hard to do. So thank you very much. Sometimes even that is a starting point. So thank you for starting the dialogue on with such vulnerability. Yes, I do. I am a licensed marriage and family therapist. I've been in the Bay Area. I've been in the Bay Area for more than 2 decades now. India Currents brings back a lot of memories. No trip to the grocery store would be complete without picking up.
Yes.
Those days when dinosaurs used to roam there used to be hard copies of it, and so that was great. So it's great to be with you guys talking about it. My practice is I'm now in the East Bay. I do have a physical practice in Fremont and Pleasanton, but right now everything is telehealth. And I've been seeing clients for a while now, but more than just doing one-on-one work with clients, I have spent many. I take every opportunity to talk about therapy and therapy, how it shows up in our community, because that was the starting point of this whole journey for me. So right from grad school, I was pretty certain that was where I was going. Therapy does work, but making it work from a cultural perspective was something that, so I've over the years trained other therapists, because I do believe we need that primer to make
Can
it
I
work.
pause you right there?
Sure.
How, because I know you started, working in this space so long ago, and now, of course, like the dialogue has caught up and the
Right.
conversation has caught up with what you believe.
Mm-hmm.
But back when, especially because you are an immigrant from
Mm-hmm.
India,
Mm-hmm.
how was it to like think about therapy and think about mental health in India and then translate that over here as well? And what were the people around you saying about that sort of career decision?
So I'm relatively newer to the field, in the sense 10 years is nothing. So I came back. I was a teacher before, and I I actually saw counseling, not therapy. There's a slight difference between counseling and therapy that people tend to kind of use interchangeably. I did see some great counseling work done in India, in schools specifically. So the concept was there, along with the stereotypical ideas of what therapy is, right? So the idea of someone sitting, on a couch and just kind of saying what's wrong, everything is somebody else's fault, or you're just out of your mind. Because language in our culture, language around mental health is very is limited, right? So that's the second part. I just want to talk about that, and that severely hampers education around it, information around it, because if you don't have the language to talk about it, presenting it is not that easy. That was a big part of the work. I could understand so many constructs that would work, but then translating back into a language that, or finding the words around it to make it work, that has been a challenge that we have faced for a very long time. So, but talking about it, if you talk about stigma with mental health, of course a lot has changed in the last 10 years. I feel it's been a lot of conversation has been facilitated with the pandemic happening. There's a lot more acceptance that these are things that are impacting us emotionally. Having said that, stigma around mental health is cuts through all cultures, right? But I
Mhm.
just want, I want us to know that the other layer for us as a community, you call, the Desi community, the South Asian community, the whole collectivist cultures that we belong to, there's that other element also, right? And that stigma has, where like we as a culture, we are beyond just us, we're part of a group, right? It's when I remember, anything that's celebrated, think about it, when you have something that you have achieved, it's kind of celebrated across. Sometimes, it's with family celebrating it, your neighborhood is celebrating it, right? And so then when you fail at something also, it's kind of, it's not, you're just not failing yourself, you're failing a lot of other people. So that's where, because the stigma of mental health is inherently comes from shame. You're flawed, you say, have a sense there's something wrong with me, right? And when there's something wrong with me and you belong to a collectivist culture like ours in general, right? It feels like you've let down a lot of other people. And then asking for help, going past those barriers, creating a space in therapy that acknowledges that has been one of the greatest challenges, right? So that, along with language, a lack of language to even bring up constructs, is a big hindrance that has been, which we've tried. And right now, therapists across, we have far more people joining the profession than before. Definitely, I see so many of my colleagues who are more interested in understanding that the cultural perspective is important. So I'm very hopeful for it. But coming from a client's perspective, coming from someone seeking help, these are the hindrances that inherent. Understand that one of the things that stops us from getting help is, hey, we feel we've let down a lot of people out there. So that's a primer to the work as it is, then the language, and then information by itself. Stereotypical understanding of what mental health is gives us a very narrow thinking about it. And all of this stops, and then finding the right resources, finding the right therapist. Therapy works, right? Then finding the right fit. That whole process sometimes is so overwhelming. But if you can, listeners listening, if you can those of you who are joining in, if this resonates with you, right? Just take a moment.
I have a quick question here.
Yeah.
So when you say, finding the right therapist, and I think this is a common question that a lot of people ask, and I'm sure our viewers also, many of you may be feeling these very same emotions, but when you say finding the right therapist, right, how do you know if it's a right fit? And then how do you know that it's not a right fit? Because I remember when I was in high school, I was seeing a therapist and it was not the right fit, right? And I felt very uncomfortable, very just not okay. And I felt almost as if I was being judged, right? And then now I am in a position where I'm planning to see a therapist, but I carry so much anxiety and fear just to even wrap my head around seeing a therapist because of this bad experience. So for anyone who may be able to relate or is interested, how do we know we found the right fit? What does that look like? How, especially coming from a Desi background, I think for me that was the most disconnected experience because that person, the therapist I was seeing, was not from a Desi background, and or not that she had to be from a Desi background, but someone who just wasn't understanding the cultural component.
Exactly.
So from a therapist perspective, how do you know that you've made the match?
You don't want to think of it as from a therapist perspective. You want to think of it from a self-advocacy perspective. You answer the question. You kind of answered your own question. When you feel judged, this is the last space you want to feel judged, right? This is the last space where you want to feel uncomfortable. Your therapist does not, you're right, it doesn't have to be in the same cultural background. Exactly. Right. You and I, all three of us can be from India, but our experiences are vastly different, right? You want to have a therapist who they don't have to have the same experiences as you, but they have to help you make sense of your experiences. So you have the feeling of judgment, the feeling of being heard, right? The feeling that you need, it's working. You also know it's working. I tell all my clients, think you're coming for one session, right? And then go back and just process it. Think about how it made you feel. Like your emotions, your feelings, you are your best ally there. Don't go by saying, I can be a great therapist, but I'm not a great fit for everyone. Right? And most of the times I'll screen it. As a therapist, it's my ethical duty. I'll screen people, right? I'll see it. But sometimes I might feel you're a good fit for me, but this is where our own advocacy is so important. And if we just tap into it and pause and ask ourselves, how did that feel for myself, right? And we will be able to answer that. And the second thing I feel,
I just wanted to comment on that portion of it because it's something, she brought up that I think a lot of people, like she said, have felt, and including me, where, you go to therapy and there's a lot of self-doubt, right?
Yes,
Even
yes.
accessing
Mhm.
therapy, there's that hurdle of like trying to even seek therapy despite, let's say everyone is very supportive, even then it's like hard because you
Yeah.
have to want to get that help.
Hmm.
And so when, at least for me, when I was, I didn't get to really choose. I
Hmm.
mean, even if I got to choose my therapist, I didn't know what I needed from my therapist. Like I knew that I felt discomfort, but a lot of that discomfort also just came from, a lot of other external things of just a lot of anxiety in general. And, you know, I just wonder like how do you this may be a hard question. You kind of did
Yeah.
say like you don't have to like rely on your gut, but how do
Mhm.
you figure that out? Because like for me, there's so many other layers to like
Mhm.
even go to therapy in the first place. And now that I've had like a traumatic
Mhm.
experience, I'm less likely to be comfortable with anyone. How do you
Right.
like
So you
make
you you separate the process from the person, right? Therapy as a process works. So you're not going, don't get me wrong, therapy is not always a very comfortable thing. It's in fact quite the opposite. You'll feel quite uncomfortable at times because you're sometimes going to talk about things you've never talked about before. You've kept repressed for so long. So it's difficult, right? You're in pain. There's some real
Mhm.
pain involved. That's when you're going in there, right? So don't go for comfort. I would say, think of, am I feeling judged? Right. That would be my first, that's the constant. Am I feeling judged? And as we continue, remember, you can have the most comfortable discussion with your therapist, right? You can be having a great time with your therapist, but therapy shows up in between sessions. Your life is in between sessions, right? So your gains from therapy, it should show up in your life, right? That's the other thing. You have to see what's a change that doesn't happen instantaneously. Don't have any, most times it's a process, it takes some time. But even if it takes time, you should be able to see some change in it, right? You can't be
Yeah.
incessantly in the same process. Again, you can be having a great time with your therapist. You may not speak in therapy for one time also. You can be having the most a difficult time, but if in between therapy session, that's life, right? When if it shows up there, that's your way, and you're the only one who can gauge it. And I know, I wish there was some other ways that we could make it much more easier. But our
Mhm.
self advocacy, all I can say is that at the end of the day, it addresses it addresses pain, it addresses discomfort. Treat it in the same way as you would with any other physical,
Yeah.
with physical pain. To treat it in the same way, you won't give up, right? You won't give
Yeah,
up after the first round.
I think your tip of am I feeling judged in this space is a really
Hmm.
good one because it's not even about comfort or discomfort or like that person. It's like
Hmm.
how do I feel and is
Yeah.
this person making me feel a type of way that won't be productive to the conversation. So I think that's a really, really good tip. I think there was a second part to Yeshu's question because I kind of cut you off. Do you remember what it was?
I think she was talking about the trauma of, just going back, right? And so the separation, as I said, therapy, if you just feel that you're doing this for yourself, you're doing this because you want to address a real pain, right? First of all, normalize the pain for yourself, right? Don't go in just with, it's a pain that I have. It's a distress. It'll either be a distress or a discomfort or downright pain. But either ways,
Okay.
you're the one feeling it, right? The tiredness that you described, both of you described at the beginning, right? You can describe it, but you're feeling it, right? You are
Mhm.
the one. So, as I said, the advocacy piece is very important. Now, transparency is very important, and then you just
Mhm.
you go in and don't give up on it. That's one of the main things I tell my clients, is that just because you may not fit with me, but don't give up
Right.
on therapy. And that's what we try to do, myself, my colleagues, our network. We
Yeah, so
try
can
to
you
do
tell us, now that you brought up your colleagues,
that.
because I know you have a few different projects that you're working on and they deliver different types of resources. So can you kind of go into what those are and what they're offering?
Sure. I was, along with some awesome colleagues of mine in the East Bay, we resurrected something called Basant. Basant is Bay Area South Asian Network of Therapists. And if you go to basantnow.org, we do have a directory of therapists who want to work with the South Asian, who identify as South Asians, or are trained to work with the community. There are the people who are there. Even as I said, even if we are not able to take care of what it is that you need, we have enough number of people to we can at least refer out, right? So make that call knowing that this is not the person, this may not be the first time you get through. So Basant is a great resource to have. And Srish and Yash, I'll be happy to give you some more information around it. That you can use, maybe give it to your readers later. So Basant is very dear to my heart,
Yashu
and
has
that's there.
already, yeah,
Basant
Yashu's already, yeah, there you go.
Basant, in fact, we've just started a radio show called My Eliminating the Mind, and Radio Zindagi from 12:30 to 1, which you'll get all the details on the website there. And some amazing therapists there who took it up, and we do this aside from our practice. And then workshops, workshops within the community. I work with some nonprofits, working with women. So try, as soon as I hear any kind of platform around this, I just get up, get help, normalize mental health, right? The pain is just as important to take care of. If you don't take care of it, there's a cost to it. Just understand that and work towards that.
So for me, like now that you've, definitely for our viewers provided an amazing resource, and I dropped the link for you, everyone, to check out for sure. I want to kind of, get to know Sangita a little bit more as well. So for me, I'm curious to know, how did you get started? What made you get into the world of mental health? What, motivated you? And was your education in India first and then you came here? Or, how did you come about, doing your thing? And can you give us a little, brief bio there?
Yeah, I never thought I would be a therapist. So no, my initial education was that I did my undergrad in English literature. I'm from Calcutta in India, and I moved to the Bay Area in 1998. And I was a teacher. I was actually training to be a teacher at that point of time, and a potter of all things. But I changed all of that. We came back to college. In 2010, I went back to get my master's, and that was when, before that, I had seen some great counselors at work with the international schools I was associated with, and I was really drawn to the work of doing work with children. Primarily, it was always work with children, right? There was something about the way, even as a teacher, I could understand something was going more. So those were the things that attracted me. I did my course, and then there's a bit of a process to get licensed here. That takes a bit of a while you get that, and then started private practice and teaching grad students. And primarily, again, the whole idea was therapy works, my community needs help, how do I reconcile the two? So that has been my goal. So that's what I've been doing, and hopefully trudging along and doing that, and getting voices like yours to help us along the way.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's very important to also highlight the fact that, we had a younger person who was also doing some mental health advocacy on our podcast last week. And I'm really happy to have, someone like you that's been working in this space for a little bit longer, because I also think you might understand what, different, it's like an intergenerational dialogue, and what that intergenerational dialogue might mean. So like for us, like what it, our parents did not have, I mean, that's the thing, that's what I meant. Like now the dialogue has maybe progressed to a point where even parents have that small bit of language that, they can kind of understand, but for the most part, when I was in high school, and this was more than 10 years ago now, they didn't understand mental health. They didn't really get it. And it was hard for them to they tried to give me therapy, but it just wasn't the right type. And we just weren't able to, they were trying, it was their first time having to deal with something like this. And then they don't know what's needed, and they also want to hide it because they don't want other people in the community to be very aware of that, like all the things that you've already kind of mentioned. So what is the intergenerational dialogue now that you're seeing? Has it progressed since when you first started?
Definitely, yes. But I also see, again, because I'm in the Bay Area, right? So I do see some other challenges around just the pressure of the Bay Area, the certain things that children go through that we as clinicians try to help, but we also believe it doesn't matter which generation you are. The goal is anybody having pain, especially children, right? Those who are staying in the family. The system has to change, right? So I can speak for my work that even when I do work with I work a lot with teens, and do work with teenagers. I prefer having the family in there to do the education piece around it, right? So just the information piece, sometimes it's just in a non-judgmental space. So whatever you have done before, bringing that up, what you've done before, you should not have, could not have, meeting everybody where they are in that place. So that shift has happened. I'm extremely, hopeful that we'll continue to do that. The next generation, you guys will take it to another level, right? But matching it with resources at the same time, right? Knowing how to get about it. Just knowing what I don't want to do doesn't mean that we know what to do. Right? So just because it's much more easier to talk about it doesn't mean that we've made great strides in knowing exactly what to do about it.
So that was my second part of the question is like, so now maybe potentially people might be coming to your space, but what is the conversation like? Is it still, I'm afraid that my child is seeking therapy, Okay, so it is kind of
it is there, and just knowing what confidentiality looks like. Right. Confidentiality is not perpetuating or enabling the shaming piece of it. Confidentiality is the acknowledgement that this is a space which is all about you. Right. So we keep the confidentiality not because, it's like, let's just close the door and just do therapy inside. The whole reason confidentiality is a cornerstone of the work we do, which, by the way, I must mention it here. There are some caveats to that confidentiality, which we explain when clients come in. That's not like all airtight. So there are some caveats and clients understand that very well. But those aside, it's primarily confidential. Knowing that this is a space, just put that sense of putting everything down here. Let's just make sense of it, right? It's not all about fixing. And, that moment when parents know there's nothing inherently flawed, I don't fix kids, right? There's some problem. The problem is the problem, right? These are the dialogues that really help us understand. We're not close. I feel that we're more close to, we will get more close-minded, or we tend to get more close-minded when we are shamed at it, right? When we are made to think, why didn't you think about it before? Why have you done this to your child? Versus saying, this has happened, this is the problem, let's try and fix the problem. So that's where the dialogue has shifted from going from, okay, this is your fault, this is your fault. Therapy is not about assigning fault, right? Therapy is about, this is the problem sometimes, and this is the pattern, this is what you're repeating, or the skill sets you're bringing are not adequate enough. Let's try and get you some new skill sets. These are much more open. And that's where I come in and I work with therapists. I've trained therapists to say, change the language. Language is extremely important. Let's just get some language of inclusivity out there. So it's a system that works. Any kid who comes, right, and now a high schooler coming in, they are going to go back to a system. Even if it means working with teachers, it means going back to the systems. We're trying to do some work around that. And that's how we hope. That's what every therapist, every clinician out there we're working for, is that change from a systemic way, right? So that shift definitely has happened. That kind of, here's my kid, fix it and then send it back. There's definitely a little bit more opening to what am I doing? I can just see that definitely that shift has happened. How can I help? What can I change that to make this? And again, remember, that's just one part of the work we do, right? It's a huge part, big need for it. But definitely that shift has happened versus saying, just go to your therapist, get fixed, and then come home versus what can we do? Yeah. I'm very hopeful about that.
And I think, I'm really happy to hear this, right? Just to see that we're seeing more parents coming into a space of being able to talk. I know, like last night I had a conversation with my mom, just saying like, hey, I'm planning to see a therapist, and she just was so angry with me. She was so mad, and she was like, what is it going to take for me to make sure you don't see a therapist? Like, why are you going to put the family out like that? Like, it was just a very horrible conversation that ended up me just crying my eyes out kind of situation. But, in moments like that, and again, but yet there's that ray of hope, seeing that families are eventually, or, making their way into, maybe doing it with a family therapy session, not even maybe just going by themselves, but just like a family therapy session. So that definitely, I think, is a ray of hope that, we can, only hope that, one day our parents will get to see our side. But at the same time, I think it's also important to address that maybe sometimes that parents will not get on board. And in moments like that, again, therapy is valuable because, again, for me, now I have even more reason to want to see a therapist and deal with my, problems being a Desi person or whatever that looks like, right?
Absolutely.
So, kind of to ask the question, why should people care? Like, why should people care about seeking therapy? Why should people in the Bay Area, care about seeing a therapist or being part of a network of therapists? Do you think that, with just over the years, you working with so many different people that you've seen value, for the Desi community? Like, have you seen collectively for your Desi community, progress being made? Have you seen people like, oh, this couple or this family came to therapy, so that influenced another family to want to seek it? So I kind of want to know, like, are you, in a situation where it's like mostly parents don't really come and it's usually the youngsters? Like, how do you feel? Why should
There's
people
so
care?
many. There are so many because again, you have to think we sit in a space where we hold confidentiality. So we won't be in a place where typically we will be knowing exactly how it's influenced outside of us. Only when we see the dialogue in the room changing, right? When we see the shift in the dialogue, that's when it happens. That's when we feel this hopeful. But so exactly measuring of how that is happening, I can say this much definitely. There are more people seeking help. There's definitely that shift there, which I'm sure 2 decades ago would not have been as much, right? There's actually a shift in in our countries of origin also that is very heartening to see people shift there in attitude and kind of accepting it. What I hope for people to know is that again it's pain, right? It's pain, and when we take care of something, when we look at mental health as just as pain, just and not as a phase, not as something that we can just walk it out, or just drink something and get the right immunity. When we accept it in the same way that we accept physical pain, I think we will make a big shift, and I'm very hopeful that will happen. Because
Yeah.
remember, it's not just with our community. This is
Yeah.
pretty much pervasive across, right? But I can definitely speak as for me to measure it exactly, I don't know, but I also
Yeah.
get to witness the parts, Yashi, when there are shifts in the families that I serve, the families that I see, my clients. When I do see the shifts, it definitely makes me want to keep going at the work. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I think you kind of reiterated something that Jenny had said last week too, which was that, it is pain and it is something that we need to view as like health issue, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like something, it's not, it's not, if you're like broken, if you're broken your bone, you're not going to just say, go walk that off,
No,
right? You
no,
go and get the help that you need. So that's really the change in language is
right.
something we talked a lot with her also with her as
Mm-hmm.
well. Like what are words that we can use to create inclusivity and I think one thing that you said that you've given a few tips today. So one being, when you go seek therapy to definitely make sure you don't feel judged in that space.
Mm-hmm.
But the second, to use the term pain, maybe like that can, maybe resonates with people in a better way, or maybe resonates with the older generation in a way where they can really understand it.
Yep.
um
Yep.
so yeah, and then my last question kind of would be around like themes. Like, what are themes that you've seen in the Bay Area or globally in the Desi community on mental health, like the themes of things that like just maybe because I feel like the very obvious things people already know, and they, when it's so obvious, you're like, oh, that person needs help,
Right.
but sometimes those things are so subtle and you might not even know the signs if they're like for yourself, if you
Mm-hmm.
are going through something. So potentially what could be the signs for seeing somebody that, might need some therapy or might need help? How do you see those signs, and how do you see those signs in yourself as well?
So again, focus on yourself. Right. Trying to understand everything and trying to get to understand this has this symptoms, that has that, getting into the symptomology of it may not help you. But what's constant is you, right? So if you
Mhm.
pause, when we pause and we kind of take check in with ourselves to see where we are, right? Then we know what the difference is, right? Okay, I used to do this or this. I feel sad. It's natural to feel sad. There's a reason why I'm feeling sad around it. But this is kind of going on for a long time. You are the one. If you don't pause, if you're going to wait for, okay, I don't meet this symptoms. We can all look it up. We can all see things. We can look up symptoms. We can look up this goes to this. But you are the only one who can check in with yourself, right? That's the number one thing. And sometimes we also pause when we hear it from others, right? Somebody, friends, our loved ones, that's when parents also notice for their children beyond the behavior. Hey, you've been this has been, I've seen you're more, you're getting irritable, or is something the matter? When you hear these messages consistently and you're listening to yourself, also pause. You're not in charge of finding exactly what is wrong with you, right? So, but if you've had a life, in our life cycle, when we do go through phases in which we have major adjustments to do, we have major stresses that have happened, or things that have happened before and we repressed it, we know it. If we just pause and we ask ourselves and honestly go through a inventory for ourselves, we are that best person. We can just, unless you come to me and tell me this is what I've been feeling, right? Your therapist is not a mind reader. So don't focus on getting into what is wrong with me. Focus on seeing what is it that I'm feeling? Why am I feeling it? Just as I said, distress, discomfort, it's all on a spectrum, downright pain. But with emotional pain, with mental health things, we tend to suppress them even more because we think they're not real. We think we can get over it. We also think that we don't. Sometimes they've been internalized. Remember the messagings, all that we've talked about, Srishti, they've all been internalized. So we pause, we unfreeze, we take a moment to not just look outwardly, but just take a moment. So plug off, take that moment, make time for it to check in with yourself. Then seeing what exactly it is, it's on a spectrum, right? It can be any number of things. But once you present it, this is the thing that's happening with me, it makes it easier for us to understand what it is. But when you pause and do it, that's the first thing you want to do for yourself. That's the most important thing that you want to pledge. That's the takeaway I want for all of us to have. It's a great reminder for me also to pause and to just see, what is it that I'm feeling, right? What has been going wrong? And I can't make sense of it. And if I can't make sense of it for days at end, you know what? I need some help. So you are the starting point, right? And then of course with kids, they don't have that. They obviously are dependent. That's when you're a parent. You're also the starting point for your loved ones, or you're a partner. You're the starting point. You are seeing something. Pause, look beyond the behavior. Just don't look at, oh, I'm just be tired, this must be it. Just don't dismiss it off. Look beyond the behavior and seek help based on that, right? I know you asked me something, but I kind of brought it down to, in those
No,
outward lenses sometimes are not always
no,
inward
I
lens.
think
Let's see that.
you answered my question really well because I do think sometimes we tend to focus on the wrong things in order to, like in general as society, we like focus on the wrong things sometimes when it comes to mental health because we're not really like taking that time for ourselves to figure out whether or not that's the, how we're feeling and then, might be imposing how we're feeling on other people. And so being cognizant of it for yourself and then maybe even like for someone close to you because you might actually understand them and not trying to diagnose random people you might not know very well, I think is super important. But I do want to know the themes, and I know you haven't answered this question, but it's just, I think something like if a young person is tuning in or like an older person is tuning in, I think a general idea of like sometimes things that could potentially be triggers would be really helpful, like stressed from school or like the amount of pressure, or even a parent going through postpartum depression or postpartum depression or, something like that. Are there like in the Desi community themes that you've seen that come up a little bit more often than others?
No, I'm a little blown. I got your question, but this being something so I don't want to kind of box it down to any community, but definitely adjustment to certain times in life would be sometimes to look out for. Those are the times, right? So, what I mentioned before in life cycle, when you are going through certain years of high school, there, and you are in a, you are coming from a high achieving environment, right? So those are the years to look out for, to just say, I'm not the one who's going to, this is going to be hard, and acceptance, they're going to be hard. So adjustments, look out for timings of in your lives. And then things like grief, right? I do a lot of grief work. So grief, loss work. So sometimes just acknowledging, we sometimes tend to undermine loss. We tend to kind of keep going. So any kind of change that has happened for which your existing skill sets are not enough, and your functionality is getting impaired, which basically means your quality of life, right? It's more pervasive than before. Look, you can be anxious. I was anxious right before coming on in life. I haven't done this before. So that's a worry, once a day. But if you see, for example, with anxiety, your reassurances are not working, right? If I'm constantly anxious, if I'm constantly, so don't look for the diagnosis, don't look for anything specific, look for what is happening inside of you. If my anxieties are, everything that I used to use before is not working, is a big sign, right? So that basically says I need an upgrade here. I need to learn some either new skills, or I'm doing something, I'm repeating a pattern. I'm being stuck in a pattern. Think of anything and just see. If you're stuck in a pattern, think when people come to us for help, I feel like I'm stuck in a pattern, right? You're stuck, that means you're not being able to, your existing skill levels are not matching up. So look at these as indicators. What it is, leave it to the experts to kind of decide what. Sometimes it may not be anything clinical, or sometimes it may be just clinical. Either ways, that's there. But you look out for these symptoms, that the distress level is not abating. Even when the stressor has been removed, I'm still feeling that it's still there. It's still there, right? I know it's gone, but I said that means this residual impact has impacted you in ways that you now need help. So I hope that answers your question.
No, that answers my question.
These instead of that, kind of finding out these are the problems in the community, versus saying adjustments, life stresses, looking out for those and seeing the reactions to it. Yeah.
And I think, at the end of the day, mindfulness is so important, right? Being mindful, tapping in with yourself, tapping in with how you're feeling, right? Listening to your body, listening to your mind. Feel what you feel, as my mentor always used to tell me, and being able to address that. I think that is, at the end of the day, kind of the most important thing that you can do for yourself. And therapy is a vehicle for you to be able to achieve that space. So with that being said, I want to, kind of do a follow-up question, kind of coming from the other side, which is, as a mental health resource, like as a mental health person, especially, Ms. Sangita, you are so knowledgeable in everything you do. And I know you teach, and you have an amazing program, and you're also there to kind of train individuals in becoming, qualified or being in a space of providing therapeutic services. So what are, resources or what advice even, can you give to members who are Desi and want to be a mental health resource like yourself? What advice can you give such individuals?
So find a mentor, right, before joining in, because there's so many branches of, that you can take on mental health work. Right. That was one of the things when I got into the profession, I did not have, because I come from a community, it took a while for me to explain to people what I was trying to do out here. Right. So find someone who's in the field, reach out. Typically therapists are we're pretty, empathetic people. That's kind of, but reach out to us, and you want to get some mentoring around it, so you understand what are your options, right? So just doing therapy, there are many ways of doing it. There's a clinical piece to it, there's a testing piece to it, there's a counseling piece to it. So which road suits you best? Either ways, there's no shortcuts to it, right? There are a certain number of years that you put it in. You have to be in here, not just, I want to help people. That's a great way to start, but there's also a lot of resilience, a lot of other resources that are needed, practical resources, and only someone who's in the field is going to help you there.
I was going to ask you, what do you do to keep your mental health in check? Because I know that as a therapist, you're listening to so many stories of trauma and pain. So how do you take a step back? How do you take care of yourself?
Oh, connection. That's one of the things, because especially in private practice, one of the things that's tend to be isolated. But every time I make connections with my colleagues, that's one of the things that really keeps me going. So that is from a professional perspective. I need to be connected. These networking things, I first do it for myself. Put the oxygen mask first on myself, and then the other person. So I do that. A lot of self care, a lot of self care which works for me, which is a whole different topic. Self-care brings up a whole different box again. Self-care that works for me. I have over the years developed a plan that can help me work towards it, and knowing that I can be just as susceptible to it. In fact, when we were in training, we are required to be in therapy ourselves, which is something that we try to keep up going forward also, that we are very aware. Just because we know it doesn't mean we are not in our blind side. So making sure I'm not in my blind spot is what I do. So yeah, this is, and every workshop, every way that it invigorates me to do it, but being mindful of my fatigue and a lot of self-compassion work, which is a practice, not an attitude. There's a practice that I have to do. That's not easy
Wow,
to
a
do.
lot of little nuggets of gold in this entire life that I'm gonna have to try to remember. But Sangeeta, thank you so much for joining.
Welcome.
I know that this is the first time you've done a live,
I
and getting
know.
was
I
a whole
know. I know.
process.
I'm dating myself. Yes. Yes. This is
No, no, no. I didn't know how to do it until I started doing it for India Currents, and so this is like a new forum for me. And really, Yashu has been the one guiding me through this. So, thank you for joining. Thank you for giving the tips that you did. And obviously, if you ever want to continue the dialogue, we're always open to talking more about it. But for today, I'm going to end our
Thank you.
conversation.
Thank you, both of you, for doing this, right? Is that this is what is going to make the change, right? Every time we speak, this is what the change. So this is what change looks like right here.
Exactly.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for being here. And please let our viewers know, especially our Bay Area viewers, know how they can contact you, what your website is, how they can get informed with your services, and how we can help to support you. Sure. And all of our viewers, if you have questions for Sangita, be sure to check them out. Their Instagram page is pinned in the comment here. It is lotus_family_therapy. So be sure did I say therapy twice? No. Lotus Family Therapy. Okay. So be sure to check them out. And of course, and again, yes, please, Miss Sangita, let everyone know how they can reach you and contact you if they need you.
You did all of that. So thank you. Yes, just look me up for Lotus Family Therapy, basantnow.org. Great resource also. And call me, just call, and if, as I said, I may not be a great fit, but we know enough colleagues, any of our colleagues from Basant, we'll all be very happy to help you out and screen you and get you the right help. It is very difficult to ask for help, but the least we can do is make sure that you don't regret asking for that help. Okay?
Absolutely.
Oh my God, yes. Thank you, Sangita. You can click that X button at the top to leave the line.
I will do that. I will do that. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So her name is Bye. Her name is Sangita Biswas, if you're trying to find her on Google, and she did give me her phone number. I believe it's her therapy phone number, so it's 408-823-9360. If I'm wrong, Sangita, you can definitely type it in the chat and correct me. So with that, I think there were a few nuggets, and maybe we should go back and forth. The first one for me was, when you're seeking therapy, make sure you're not feeling judged. I think that is like a really, really key piece of advice. What do you think, Yashu?
Absolutely, and that was exactly the point I brought up, right? That definitely can scar your experience with therapy, and not only you, but even your family, along the way. So I think just being aware and giving it a try. I always say, give it a try. Even with my clients, I tell my clients, that's why I give them the free 40-minute consultation, which I treat like a free session. because it's an opportunity for them to learn my style, and I tell them to communicate with me, like, what is it that you're looking for? You know, how can I support you? Are you looking for someone to hear you out? Are you looking for someone to give you support? Homework assignments, like, what is it that you're looking for? So really
Mm-hmm.
being transparent and honest in the process with yourself as well as with your therapist, I think, is the most important thing you can do. And then
Yeah.
also, I would say, especially for the Desi community, not to fear going to a resource. I think a lot of times we have this fear, whether that's something that's ingrained from our families or even the stigma, right? Again, that stigma being a byproduct of quote unquote shame, or something that we carry, a guilt that we carry. But knowing that, you know, your therapeutic space should be a judgment free and open space where you can talk your heart and mind out. And if you ever go to, you know, a therapist or a counselor even, the first thing that they say is, you know, this is 100% confidential until and unless that we feel that you may be, you know, threatening your life or threatening the life of someone else, in which case we would have to break that confidentiality. But they will always make that disclaimer before they even start the sessions. So just knowing that
Yeah.
that is a place for you to be honest with yourself and just put it out there, let it out there. A lot of times we trap things in, and you know, conversations are uncomfortable, but sometimes those are the ones that need to be had. So
Yeah.
absolutely.
So, one, definitely go into a space where you don't feel judged. And sometimes, you know, the person might not be trying to judge you. It just, maybe that's just not the right person for you. I definitely know I've gone to bad therapy. So, I'm telling myself this piece of advice. I think the second piece of advice that I think is really important is language. Like, if your parents are, you know, or not even just your parents, your society, your community, the people around you are unable to understand what you're going through, I think relating it to a type of pain is much, it might give much more of a, like a visual understanding of what you're going through. Because like we said, like when you have a broken arm or, you know, a broken anything, or you're actually like physically sick, you have to go seek help for that. And that's exactly how mental health is as well. And it can be like, you know, it can be like a time point thing, or it can be chronic, just like illness can be chronic and, or, acute. So like really gauge for yourself. I do think this is very hard because I find that even if I can gauge that I need therapy, sometimes that taking that next step is like the hardest step ever. And so, you know, I don't know. You can know how to like make that next jump to taking that step and going to therapy. But I really hope people do actually get it. Are there any other pieces of advice, Yeshu, that you heard and liked?
I think one more thing that Sangita had said, and this is kind of important to address, is that, you know, it is a process, and that, you know, a lot of it comes from that space of vulnerability, which can be scary, and not only for like the kids, but also for the parents, right? So I think, you know, she kind of had said, you know, being able to just kind of be mindful of how you're feeling. I think that was so important. And like I said, like I love practicing mindfulness, whether that's physical, like if I'm tired, then I'll sleep. If I'm, you know, feeling sad, then I'll be aware. Like for me, the indicator of me knowing that I was going through something right now in my life was that I kept clenching my jaw tight.
Mm.
Which is like something that maybe, you know, many of you may not know, but it's a big indicator of stress. And it was something I didn't even notice. Like I had been doing it for weeks, but I didn't even notice it. And like even during this live, I was clenching my jaw, you know? So it's like it suddenly becomes like, you know, almost like part of you that you don't realize it. So just if you're mindful though, you know, and you're seeing these little changes in yourself, which is exactly what Miss Sangita was saying, I think you are more tapped in and able to say, oh, okay, this is something I want to address. You know,
Right.
so I think that is the most important thing that you can do. How do you know if you need therapy or counseling? It's just being mindful with yourself and knowing that, okay, well, this change, this adaptation that she had said, this
Yes.
change that is happening, some change, some trigger, some stressor in my life is causing me to feel the way that I'm feeling, and being cognizant of the way you're feeling, I think
Right.
is the bottom line there.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's like a very big one. I like that the theme, or like the thing that she said when I asked her what are things you are seeing, it's just these changes in your life that can act as stressors. And you don't necessarily need to know what that is or why it's happening, but if it's just a feeling that's prolonged or you just can't quite figure out why you're feeling that way, that's a good indicator that you might need to go to therapy. So,
and change doesn't have to be big, right? Change
yeah,
doesn't have to be like, oh, well, you know, like I'm getting married next month. Like change doesn't have to be something huge. Like oh, someone died.
change
Change
could
can
just
be
be
the
that I like,
littlest thing.
yeah, it could just be that like I can't find my toothbrush, you know, like it could just be like a small thing, and you might not, that might be that's just the trigger. Like it might just be causing or a cause and effect thing where like something else is really happening, but you might not really know. And just being aware of how you're interacting with others and like how others are interacting with you is also super, super important. So mindfulness, yes. So with that, I want to ask you, Yeshu, do you want to take next week off as a self-care week? Should we do that for ourselves?
Yeah, I mean, I'm totally on board. I mean, viewers, what do y'all think? You know, do we need a self? I know it's been pretty brutal out here. And you know, I've been late to my meetings with Shrishti before we go live, which I feel so bad about. But you know, I promise next one I will be there. I apologize. It will not happen again.
It's all good.
You know,
You don't have to
but
apologize on the live.
I'm apologizing on the live, everybody. I'm keeping it transparent. Okay, I haven't been on my game lately. But, you know, I do have a lot going on right now. But with that being said, I think a self-care week would be amazing next week. We will tap back in the week after that. I will see you at 45 of in that following week. And we'll chop it up and get you guys on yet another amazing episode of Desi Talk here on Email. Peace and love.
Bye. And also just keep in mind that next live we have will actually be a different theme. So we'll be moving off of the topic of mental health, but we'll be addressing a new topic and it'll be just as good. So thanks for tapping in. Check in all the IG lives from this month for mental health resources. I think they've been really great. So if you need any mental health help or want tips, we have multiple lives you can find in our IG live section to kind of get, you know, the insight you need. And potentially even if you're being mindful with yourself and you think you need therapy, there's resources. So thanks for tapping in this week, and we'll see you in 2 weeks after our self-care week. Bye.
Bye.